to the Two Guys in a Ride. Today, Rob and I are out here at the Back to the 80s car show, and we're here with Aaron. And behind us, Aaron, what do we have?
Well, we've got my 1978 Volkswagen Rabbit.
Man, you know, I got to tell you what, without looking behind me, because there are just a few modifications, boy, do I have some memories of riding in Rabbits.
You know,
I can't go into detail on them either, but I have a lot of memories.
I gotta say, I hear that a lot. This car went to SEMA last year, and unanimously, the thing that most people said was, "I had one of these when I was growing up," or "Wow, I didn't think that someone could make a Rabbit so beautiful." So there's a little bit of nostalgia tied into this car.
There certainly is. Now, and talking about SEMA, this car has some accolades. So it won best of Euro.
Yep, best European import at SEMA.
At SEMA 2021.
Yep, correct.
That's huge. Wow. Now, not only that, but you've been featured in the Volkswagen Performance magazine.
Yep, Performance VW, the June 2022 copy. I'm actually the cover car and the center feature.
And also today here at Back to the 80s, you won Car of the Show, right?
Yep, I won Best of Show, and then apparently Buck Hill's Choice, so the owner of the facility that we're at, had an award, and they chose the vehicles.
Well, I'll tell you what, and I mean, there's 3 million reasons why. So let's talk about this. Well, actually, I do have one more question before we dive into the car.
Yeah, please.
Where did you get your love of cars for?
You know, I grew up building scale model cars with my uncle. And, that's where I think I started to have an appreciation for different cars.
Okay.
But, it goes back to, I think my parents will say that I was born at a racetrack. So my parents used to go up to Brainerd International Raceway.
Sure,
They used to watch the Can-Am and Trans Am cars and the motorcycle races. And apparently when I was still in my mother's womb, they were still going up to the races. Oh. And every time, a V8 or some, Can-Am car drove by, I would kick. And so apparently it's been in my blood the entire time I've been alive.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, how much of this have you done yourself?
I've done an awful lot. I did a lot, but it also took a lot of really generous help from some qualified friends and supporters. So.
And you're going to see that once we start taking a look at this. Wow. All right. So I'm going to let you pop the hood, and we're going to start there. I'll hold the mic for you. All right. Well, if I could whistle and it would sound good, I'd whistle. That's sexy. That is really nice. Look, man, you have... Okay. So if we take a look at an original interior engine of a Rabbit.
Yeah.
You have done some customizing here as far... I'm not talking about the engine and the suspension. I'm talking about just the bodywork inside.
Yeah, the engine bay itself has a ton of work, and the idea was to make it as empty as possible while still having subtle touches that look like it could have been factory.
Okay.
So how do you blend a mixture of shaving and smoothing with restraint where non-Volkswagen people might not recognize that was done to the engine bay?
So right here, good example, come down the right-hand side. On a normal Rabbit, you would have exposed steel coming straight out there.
You would have an engine
frame.
Yep, you'd have an engine mount, transmission mount on the right-hand side, or the driver's side. You'd have an open rail. You'd have a battery tray and an airbox mount that would go on that side, and really filling up the entire driver's side of the engine bay.
Oh yeah, it's packed in there. And then you'd have the same on the left side, basically with the frame. And
correct.
Then back here, what did you do? Because that's different.
So we boxed the frame rails and bead rolled them. We then bead rolled the sides of the wings of the engine bay there. We then moved and boxed in behind the strut towers. That would normally curve and actually touch the side of the engine bay. And then we shaved the firewall. So we put a new firewall in and then put a new piece horizontally in. We bead rolled and then cut in depressions to mirror the vertical part of the factory side of the engine bay.
Okay.
So again, little details that we put into this to make sure that it was more of a factory-inspired, Easter egg per se.
Sure.
While still shaving it. So I didn't want a bathtub, right? I wanted something that had some character and some depth.
Okay. So that was my next question: is why? Why did you go to all that work to tuck all those things away? But I don't know what you see, I see that you've cleared out a space for a work of art to sit.
I mean, that's the simple answer, right?
That right there is another piece of work. It's a work within a work.
Well, I appreciate that.
I mean, that takes artistry.
So I love old classic American hot rodding, right?
Okay.
50s Chevys, 32 Fords, all of that stuff. And I love the metalwork and the craftsmanship that previous generations would do to make these custom cars. But I'm also a German car enthusiast, and so actually what a lot of folks don't understand is that these cars in Germany and Holland are the equivalent of the cars that we have in the US that are the hot rods. And so this level of work, I don't want to say is commonplace, but a lot more commonly found overseas.
Okay.
And so I was just inspired by the guys over there building these cars because I do have a love for these cars. And I went, what would previous American hot rodders do? How would you take metalworking approaches to this car where it's not normally found in these cars here in the US, right? What's the attention to detail and putting our hot rodding stamp on it? And that's what we have right here.
That's just awesome. Man. Now, I absolutely love how it looks. I mean, that is just, it's so much space around there. It's nice to be able to see the engine.
Yeah.
But let's get some basics about the engine. Tell us how many horsepower, torque, whatever you want to share.
Absolutely. So the engine is based on a Volkswagen 4-cylinder. It's a 2-liter block. The cylinder head is actually a sand cast kit motor from the early 80s by a company called Oettinger. So if you know what an ARDUN flathead is, where you take your flathead forward and then you put an overhead cam set of cylinder heads on it, and it turned it into an engine that didn't previously exist. This is the same analogy here. So the cylinder head and engine package that is here is a really limited homologation type run where Oettinger built a dual overhead cam 16-valve engine when Volkswagen factory only had a single overhead cam 8-valve engine. And it came out in the late 70s, early 80s, and Volkswagen actually came out with their 16-valve dual overhead cam engine in like 85 or 86. Don't quote me quite on that, but the Scirocco was the first car to get that engine. So this engine's super special. There's only about 900 of the kit motors. There are about 1,600 of a limited edition car in France from this organization as well. So really limited numbers,
very limited, rare.
Globally.
Okay, so what was the amount of horsepower?
It made 164 horsepower.
164.
Yep.
Okay, and how about the same amount of torque? Maybe a little higher?
Like 149.
Oh, 149. Okay, all right. Man, that is beautiful. What an absolute work of art. Now, you've done some work with the suspension, right?
Yeah.
Nothing has not been touched really, but tell us about your adjustable suspension here.
Yep, so the suspension is Air Ride Performance. It's air suspension with all Dash 6 braided hoses or 3/8 hard lines that I've built with an Airlift Performance 3P management, airlift management, and then a Flow 5-gallon tank that we upholstered in leather and houndstooth to match the rest of the interior.
And we'll overlay some pictures of that because that's sitting right in the back there.
Yeah. What a lot of people don't recognize, though, is that the fender arches have been pulled a 1/2 inch front and rear, and the control arms have been narrowed a 1/2 inch in the front, and the rear axle has been narrowed 1 inch on each side in the rear, so that we could fit a 15x8 and a 15x9 wheel under OEM-looking bodywork. So again, real subtleties that if you parked next to a stock Rabbit, you could see, but out on its own, it still has the factory silhouette and body lines.
Wow, that's an incredible lot of thought and detail going into into the car. But I love it. I mean, it's carried over from the engine. Now it's into the bodywork on the side, into the wheels.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about your interior for a minute.
Yep.
So in the front here, those weren't standard Rabbit gauges.
No, so those gauges are from Speed Hut. They're a GPS speedo and digital tack, all to emulate the Oettinger edition gauges that you could buy when you bought that kit from that tuner.
Okay, so then in that sense, it would look similar to those.
Similar, but just a little bit different. They were like a black-faced gauge from VDO back in the day.
But there would have been, say, 5 gauges.
Correct, yeah.
2 big, 3 small, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you again, hearkening back to that original look.
Yeah.
But modernized. Okay, and then, of course, in the middle, you've got you're on your foot pedals. Let's talk about those. I'm assuming you were just be able to see all the lines coming into them, or is that electronic throttle?
Nope, that's a normal throttle cable.
Okay.
But I put the Willwood race car pedals and controls in this car so that I could shave the firewall in the engine bay. And then all the lines are either run through the fenders or one bulkhead connector into the engine.
But that allowed you to make that little extra space in there in the engine compartment.
Just to make it extra clean and sterile. Absolutely.
I love it. Okay. All right, so tell us about the shifter.
Okay, so the shifter is made by a company called CAE, and it's a cable shift shifter. It's not something that you'd normally find in a Rabbit. Normally it's a rod and joint type shifter from the factory.
Okay.
This transmission is out of a 2017 Jetta though, and so it's hydraulic clutch and cable actuated shifting. So we updated all that. That's actually a motorsport shifter that a lot of race cars have.
Okay.
I have a history racing cars, and specifically Volkswagens and SCCA and Grand Am, and so I'm really inspired, and I have a lot of eye for motorsport touches. So anytime I can put a motorsport piece into a car, I'm going to. I guess it's almost predictable, right? And so I couldn't leave anything alone. So I had a good friend of mine, Jack's uncle, Joe Dieters, owns Dieters Metal Polishing in just a couple hours north of the cities here, and he did all the chrome work on the car, and so we chrome plated everything that's visible.
That's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Tell us about the seats.
Yep, absolutely. So I really love Singer Porsches. I love the backdating. I love everything that they do. Absolutely. And
if you didn't notice, it's on the door handle on the outside.
Oh yeah.
So the door handles are out of a Porsche 944. And it's actually a common modification that water-cooled Volkswagen guys do.
Okay.
Those bolt into these cars with very minimal modifications.
Okay.
Porsche 924s and 944s actually have a lot in common with early first and second generation Golfs and Jettas.
Okay.
So it's just a fun little touch that people do. But with the Singer cars, they do a lot of backdating, and they really simplify the interiors of the car, and they make them like very luxurious, even though they're race cars. And so these seats are made by a company called GTS Classics out of Austin, Texas. They're not the Singer seats, but they're very much inspired by what Singer puts into their cars and the Recaros that they have. And so it was a no-brainer to reach out to them and get that seat custom built, and then also upholstered in the flame red leather. There's 6 hides of Moore and Giles flame red Carlisle leather in this car.
Okay.
Perforated in the headliner, non-perforated the rest of the interior. And then the red and white houndstooth was really just, again, back to that American hot rodding.
Yep.
Think like C1 Corvette, that red and white colorway. Okay. The houndstooth had to come into this car as well.
Man, I just gotta love that. All right, so now moving to the back, you no longer have a second seat.
Correct.
Okay, so talk us through the equipment that we see back here. I know you mentioned already up front. But...
Yep. So again, there's a Flow air ride tank, upholstered to match the interior with the leather and the houndstooth. And then what you see behind it are custom bent hard lines for the air suspension, and then the manifold and the air management system from Airlift. If we go a little bit further back, that's my dry sump oil system tank. So the oil pan is a zero capacity pan, and there's actually an external pump on the engine. It's all race car stuff. And so all of the oil goes back into that, and that's how I fill up the oil in the car.
So the next question is then, now that you've done it,
yeah,
it's done, you've won the awards, What's next?
I have a few more shows this year. I'm going out to Philadelphia and I'm going out to New Jersey later in the summer. And once it's done being shown, I'm just going to drive it. I'm just going to enjoy it. You know, cars, you can have a beautiful work of art, and it's a shame to just let it sit in your garage,
cars
right?
need to be driven.
And so, yeah, I'm just going to keep it clean. I'm going to drive it and enjoy it. You know, it's been 11 years of a lot of dedicated work, and so now I'm just going to try and enjoy the fruits of my labor.
So do you have another project coming up?
Oh, I've got way too many projects.
We could have you at SEMA again.
You will see me at SEMA again. We could have an entire podcast about what projects I have lined up and what I want to work on. I have automotive OCD, I swear. But I have a 1989 Golf Rally, which is a homologation car that I imported from England in 2013. So it's a Mark II Golf, so it's a 1985 to 1991. But it's a factory all-wheel drive, factory wide-body car, factory supercharged car, much like what the E30 M3s were. Yeah. The equivalent of that for a Volkswagen GTI
you're going to make wheeler dealers jealous. I'd love to have found that.
So I've had that for a couple years, and I'm going to, and that's had a build, and it's been featured in the magazines before, but I'm going to rebuild that, and that's going to SEMA in 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So last question.
Yes.
What's one of your favorite memories with this car?
You know, there's so many memories with my friends and just like the camaraderie that comes with building a car. All the lows and the highs, you're in it together with the people. And like I said earlier, this is not the sum of my labor, it's the sum of a lot of friends who are more talented than I in many ways. Like, don't get me wrong, I've done a ton of the work myself and I've learned along the way, but it couldn't have been done without the generosity and the talent from all those folks. You know, it all culminating together at SEMA and winning that award from Hemmings Motor News and from folks that are real hot rodders and really known in the hot rod world.
Is really neat.
So that's really when I knew something special happened. And then I was at another show, the biggest Volkswagen Audi show in North America, called Alpine Volks Fair in Helen, Georgia, about 3 weeks ago, and I won Best of Show there. And just to win Best of Show at an event that I've been really wanting to participate in for so many years, really, that meant a ton to me.
Absolutely. Well, you know, Aaron, thank you so much for sharing your time and your beautiful car and creation with us. We sure appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for interviewing me, and thank you for coming out to the show.
Thanks for watching.